Sometimes you want to grant access to a class's private variables to another object or even a few select objects. This is accomplished with a friend declaration. Let's take a look at an example here. We'll make a working copy of simpleinheritance.cpp and paste it into our working project. I'm just going to maximize this and page through it real slowly for those who are typing along at home. Now, if we go ahead and compile and run this, we see that it's working just fine. And of course, this was described in our last movie on simple inheritance. It basically has these three classes that are derived from a base class: dog, cat, and pig. Now, each of these classes actually calls a constructor in the base class. So here we see dog calls the constructor in animal, and cat calls the constructor in animal, and pig also calls the constructor in animal. And the constructor in animal is in the protected section. Now, if I move this constructor to the private section, I can just get rid of that because it's the only thing in the protected section. And now I've changed the access from protected to private for that constructor. So if I save this and I try to compile and run it, you'll see that it doesn't work. So one way to grant access is by putting it in that protected section, giving it protected access. Another way to do this is to add our derived classes as friends. So we can do this right here. And we can say friend class dog, friend class cat, and friend class pig. This technique exposes all of the private members of the base class to the derived classes. So if I now compile and run this, you'll see that our example is working just fine and we're able to access those constructors. So now those derived classes have access even to the private members of the animal class. This also works for functions. So if I come down here and create a function, this function is trying to access a private data member from the animal class. Now I come down here and I say cout, the dog is named get animal name, D for dog. Now, of course, this isn't going to work because my function is trying to access a private data member. So I'll try and run that and we get compiler errors. And we see here within this context that it's trying to access this private data member right here. So if I declare that function as a friend, like this, and I can just take its function signature from down here and copy and paste it. And I don't actually need the name of the variable there, and put in a semicolon. Now, when I try to compile and run this, it works just fine, and it says the dog is named Rover. And now the function has access to the private data member. Of course, this function now has access to all of the private data members, and this can of course be convenient, but it can also undermine encapsulation and a lot of the controls that make object-oriented programming work so well. It's usually safer to use an accessor, and so we of course would do that like this. And then I can remove this from the friend and compile and run it, and it works just fine. So the friend declaration allows you to grant private member access to other classes and functions, and this can be handy at times, and it may even be necessary at times, but it needs to be used with caution. Most of the time, it's best practice to access private members through the class interface. So let's go ahead and delete our working file and run clean to get set up for the next lesson.